Neil Haley Show, and Jesus and Ugly Jody, and also Trimulcast, if you say Storehouse Media Group. Always forget that. Shout out to Sherry from Storehouse. Jody, thanks for stopping by. We kind of talked about, and he really made me think. And what surprised from last week's podcast that made me really think, Jody, is that we start a business, we become too busy, we want to scale that business, and we make the mistake of hiring five people to start. We spend all this money on infrastructure and staff, but we really didn't have our core competencies covered yet. And then we literally run into a position where we spent all this money and there was no result when we scaled. Scaling's such a challenge. And we're going to talk about different phases on each one of these podcasts. And really, it's interesting, Jody, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. Last week we talked about scaling and kind of the ability to outsource so many things. And there's a lot of practical application of being able to outsource because that's how most small businesses get up and going. But even medium and large size businesses can outsource certain things. But there does come a point in every business owner's life where they have to figure out, hey, this is too important to put on somebody else's plate. Like it has to stay in-house. This has to be something that we bring on employees to manage, to operate, and to run for us here. So that's what we'll talk about today.
And it's pretty crazy, right? It's pretty nuts to think about it. So, like, if we talked phases, first things, we got an accountant, we got a bookkeeper, we got somebody who would manage, or maybe manage day-to-day certain things. We outsource to other things, maybe social media, so we can focus on our core competencies. But now we've scaled to the point we still have no more time. How do we hire that first subcontractor 40 hours a week, or that first employee 40 hours a week? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times folks look at it and they, hey, who should I hire first? The thing I always ask my clients is, well, what are you really good at? If you're really good at technical components or operational components, well, you probably need to hire somebody who can come in and help you with the business aspects of running your business. Maybe they're a COO. Maybe they're just, the admin assistant that kind of comes in alongside you and is handling some of the day in and day out menial stuff like scheduling meetings or, managing all your phone calls or things coming in for you personally. There's the sales element. Are you the one doing all of your sales? And I think you mentioned last time, hey, you need to be the one selling your product. Well, that's great. But if you're selling your product, who's fulfilling orders? Who's, on the back end, making sure that stuff's getting shipped and is arriving and that there's a good quality product that's being delivered. And on the inverse, if you're not the one selling your product, hey, I know how to build this thing and I can make it, but I'm really good on more of the admin side. Like I want to be the one tracking orders and things like that. Great. You need to find a personality that's going to be charming and engaging, who understands what it is you're selling and providing, and being able to take that message out to the world to share with them, and that people are going to want to interact with them. Just because I always love it because especially in software sales, you deal with some of these nerds and they really don't. They're brilliant people. They're friggin' geniuses, but they're not really personable. They get frustrated. They don't understand why people can't just grasp their technology on the first meeting. It's like that's not how it works. You got to sow the seed. We talked about that early on, where much like my ministry work, you just sow the seed. You get the information out there. You let people think about it. They mull on it, and then you come back and revisit it. You kind of tend and nurture those relationships to see, hey, we know this. What the solution we've got will help this industry or this agency or this component. But what do we do to make sure that that's moving forward, going on the right track? And then obviously time to market. That's the other big thing. When you start hiring people on, are you getting the best and most qualified people? Do you need them? Uh, there are people who are awesome at admin work. They may come at a higher price. Do you need somebody I don't need somebody who's phenomenal. I need somebody who's at least just,
Right.
mediocre to get this thing going. And if I can once I get income coming in and I get the revenue generated, then I may start to look for the all-stars that I can bring on. Some industries, you're going to want the all-stars right away. That's one thing I've noticed. You work with large, value added resellers, and sometimes they're bringing in folks right out of college. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to sell a product or explain a solution to a government component, it may be better to bring people that are retiring from those government components, bring them in because they can explain operationally how this solution, how this technology can help the operators back in those organizations.
Right. So you're so right. And where I think what you're talking about, Jody, is that first hire has to be an area that is going to free you up to do more. That's what I'm looking with my AI employees now. What stuff can I automate or have my employees do so I can do more of my core ability, what my goal is. What my business model looks like is unlike somebody else's business model. I want to be on meetings all the time, either doing podcasts or consulting with people. And that's all. And basically, other hours, maybe doing some real good research or running specific things, but nothing else. Once I look at that next key hire, it's going to have to replace me. That's not going to be an inexpensive venture. That's going to be a very expensive venture. So you have to really look at what are you looking to replace? And that's where I always recommend AI in this process. I say, okay, AI, what do you think I should do? And then ask 5 different models. I've learned this very quickly. Advice from AI is as good as you think it is, and really kind of think it out after you get that advice and try it and test it and then ask multiple people. But say, okay, right now my business is here. And then you're going to get consultants from multiple areas giving you ideas and saying, okay, maybe I should run with this. Another big thing is when you're stuck in that process is hire a business consultant. Hire somebody who's going to at least understand your business, learn your business, and really figure out that business. Say, okay, this is where your bottleneck is. You need to hire someone here first. Don't go ahead and hire this person here. Because AI could just say, hire somebody for $300,000 a year. Then you're sitting here and your company goes bankrupt in a year. That they're not going to look at the final phase. They're not going to look at what's that going to lead if you hire that person. So my question for you, Jody, is when you hire, how do you know you have enough money to hire that person? And you
Well,
could replace that with a return on investment.
yeah, that's a great question. And I want to tap on one thing you said earlier with the AI stuff. AI is a great tool, but AI is not going to run a company. Um, One thing you always have to be careful of with AI is, like you said, you're running 5 different models. Well, you're running 5 models for a reason because they have different access to different data sets. And if AI is getting fed bad data, you're going to get bad answers. So to your point, use it, but it's got to make sense in what your individual plan is. And so I would say, hey, Neil, you're bringing me on. I'm your business consultant. I've got a pretty good idea of what you're doing. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, don't look at the bottom line. Don't look at the number necessarily of what you're going to pay this individual or what you think this individual is going to give back to you. The first thing I would ask you is, hey, is this somebody, you got their sign right behind you. Your name is on that sign. Is this somebody you would want to bring in who can understand the culture, not of just what Media Giant Empire is, but who I, Neil, am? And so they have to understand that because when they come into your company or into my company, or most of my clients, they're taking on somebody's dreams, somebody's vision. We started our companies because God put something on our hearts to kind of go forward with and to step forward and trust Him in and build and develop. I don't want to bring somebody in who doesn't have that vision. I don't want to bring somebody in who's just here to do a job, quote unquote, and or to get a paycheck, quote unquote. I want somebody who has the same passion and vigor and enthusiasm, maybe not to the same level as you and I might have for our businesses, but they have to understand what it is. That's one of the things I love about working with ministries is the folks that are alongside you in a ministry, the vast majority are volunteers. And so that really kind of shows you that they're committed, they're in. God has put something on their heart that they are driven in this direction and they're going to be part of this ministry because they want to be, not because they have to, not because we're paying them. Um, can you find people like that who have the culture, who have the intelligence, who have the character and the personality and the charm and the engagement that you would need them for to join your organization. I would argue if you find somebody like that, paying them $300,000 if it makes sense financially is absolutely on the table. However, you do, like you said, you want to make sure, one of the things I always try and do is I never bring on anybody unless I know I've got the money to cover them. And I don't want to, I would feel horrible if someone were depending on me and I had to tell them, hey, I got to let you go. You got 2 weeks or a month and then we're out of money. So I always try and make sure that, and that's why most of the folks on my team are 1099s. It's basically, hey, they know the deal. And if they're coming in and doing work with me, if they want to take 2 months off and go hike around Europe, great, feel free. But for most companies, they don't have that luxury, right? They're
Right.
producing something that they need employees there to work alongside them and to have that vision. But that's one thing I always try and get my clients to think about. It's not just the business aspects, it's the culture aspects. Your
Mhm.
company, is this person going to be adding positively to the culture you're trying to establish in your organization? Or are you just putting a butt in the seat because you have to get somebody in to do
Right.
something? Because you lose
And
culture very quickly when you do that.
And if you decide to hire like scale and say, okay, I'm going to bring on 4 individuals and put out this amount of cash and say, oh, I'll make it back in sales, that is the biggest mistake you'll make. And I've done it multiple times. And it's because it sounds like it feels great. Then it's more work on you and your bottom line doesn't look good. So this is where this process begins where you need a business consultant that could have see things in a different degree. And Jody, where can people contact you to schedule a call with you?
Obviously through LinkedIn, through my website at sls.consulting. I'm also on X. But yeah, always looking forward to having conversations with folks.
All right. That was a special Trimulcast, the Neil Haley Show, the Storehouse Media Group podcast, and Jesus and Ugly Jody, guys. Take care.